Today, our much anticipated speaker celebrates with us our now pre-Veterans Day veteran celebration. So without further ado, Ned Broyles.
Thank you, Ken. Gentlemen, I'm going to talk about early Naval Air Flight training and a few of my experiences prior to and during World War II. I applied for the Naval Flight Training Program in 1936. There were 14 candidates selected from California plus one alternate. I was that alternate. Later, one of the primary candidates was eliminated and I was in. We were enlisted as second-class seamen and sent to Long Beach Naval Reserve Base for what was called elimination training, which consisted of some ground school flight, up to 10 hours of flight time, and this little jewel within which we were expected to solve. This is the N2C2. There were 12 of us that went on to Pensacola, where we were schooled in aeronautics, naval subjects, expected to become proficient in Morse code, and were cross-trained in all types of naval aircraft. Squadron 1 was this aircraft, built by the Naval Aircraft Factory, which long ago went out of business. Squadron 2, primary land planes, essentially this plane with wheels. Squadron 3, fleet-type aircraft, the type we had aboard the aircraft carriers at the time. We had an emphasis on dive bombing. Squadron 4, a multi-engine seaplane. This was our airplane, twin-engine seaplane built by Martin. You can see it had open cockpits. And Squadron 5, to this day, that's my all-time favorite, the F-4B-4. Incidentally, that's me climbing into the cockpit many years ago. Approximately 70% of us completed the flight training, and we were sent to the fleet as fleet aviation cadets. I was sent to the USS Milwaukee, a light cruiser, later given to Russia under Lend-Lease during the war. Had two catapults on the stern atop of the torpedo tubes. Each catapult held one SOC aircraft. Very fine aircraft for the day, good rough water characteristics, built by Curtiss, 550 horsepower engine, stay in the air 9 hours, carry a depth charge. Our mission was scouting, naval gunfire, anti-submarine patrol. Launching this aircraft was pretty straightforward. We were just shot off the catapults on the stern of the ship. Recovery was a little dicier. When the ship was prepared to recover aircraft, it took a position 45 degrees off the wind line. This shows a starboard recovery. It can be done from either side. And it trailed a wire net on the surface of the water, about 25 yards off the beam. When ready to recover, it hoisted the CAS flag, which under current acronyms would be called the Charlie flag, then turned 90 degrees to 100 degrees through the wind line, which created a slick just after that slip. Then the pilot would position himself so he could make a landing at the optimum moment of the creation of that slick, boost himself up into the net where a hook on the bottom of the float would catch the net. This shows the ship landing, or the aircraft landing at the stern of the ship. You can see the wire net streaming on the surface. That pallet remains upright. It has a soft front to keep the aircraft from overriding the net. And then the man in the rear cockpit scrambles over the pilot, lifts the hook out of the top of the wing of the aircraft, hooks it on the hook at the end of the davit, swung out by the boatswain. The lift starts up, 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 and onto the catapult. Ready to go again. Shortly after I joined the ship, we were in the Southwest Pacific searching for Amelia Earhart. Although she was lost over a year earlier, public interest in her flight was still quite high. The last leg of her ill-fated flight was from Lae, New Guinea to Howland Island, at the bottom of the chart there. Distance of a little over 2,200 miles. Howland sits out there all alone. It's about 1.5 miles long, half-mile wide airstrip. Baker Island, the only other island in the vicinity, is about 40 miles to the south. Christmas to the right there is over 300 miles. We searched the area, north, south, the entire area. Our search was negative. About mid-1941, I was transferred to a new training command at Corpus Christi, Texas, where I was assistant training officer. Right after the war started, the Navy instituted a new program whereby older pilots with a lot of flight time and who wanted to join the fight could, by taking a special syllabus, qualify as naval aviators. I administered that program at Corpus Christi, Texas. Surprised one morning when in walked Charles Buddy Rogers. He and his wife, Mary Pickford, were staying in a motel just outside the base. Charles Buddy Rogers completed the program, became a flight instructor. I was sent right back out to sea after the war started and headed for Guadalcanal aboard another light cruiser, the USS Montpelier. Similar to the old Milwaukee, 2 catapults on the stern. We flew the same aircraft that I flew off the Milwaukee, two SOCs. There's a hangar deck just below those catapults. After arriving in the Solomon Island, Guadalcanal area, we were joined by another ship, the Chicago, and a few destroyers. And we had our first scrimmage. We were on patrol between San Cristobal and Murnell at the bottom right hand of the chart there, a distance of about 200 miles. And we had the Chicago with us and a few destroyers. And late one afternoon, we were attacked by a number of Japanese aircraft, twin-engine Bettys. They were carrying torpedoes. The Chicago immediately astern of us was sunk. We were hit with a torpedo, but it was a dud. Sometimes I imagine I can still hear that thump. A short time later, Task Force 39 was formed. Our Admiral Merrill, my ship, the Montpelier, was the flagship. We were joined by 3 other cruisers, the Cleveland, Columbia, and Denver, and a squadron of destroyers under Captain Carney. That's the same Captain Carney that as Admiral Carney, after the war, became Chief of Naval Operations. Our day in and day out task was patrolling that slot between the Solomon Islands. Average is about 70 to 100 miles wide and over 350 miles long. We usually did this at night, and it was an area of high enemy activity. One task that we were given, I remember, we were to bombard Kolombangara Island, which lies on the shores of Kula Gulf, up at the northwest end of the Solomons. Kolombangara contained a large concentration of Japanese troops and supplies. Our ship set out for their objective. I took off from Henderson Field in the PBY-5A. I was the co-pilot, flew ahead of the task force. Long about midnight, we discovered 2 Japanese cruisers just about 50-60 miles north of Kolombangara. Several hours later, the 2 forces met, slugged it out. The 2 Japanese cruisers were sunk in about 20 minutes. I was right on top of it. Star shells, naval gunfire, very spectacular, a sight that I'll never forget. An amusing incident, Josephus Daniels, Secretary of the Navy to President Wilson during World War I, banned liquor from all naval vessels, which gave rise to the current folk anomaly of Cup of Joe. The Navy drinks a lot of coffee. Well, one afternoon, the Australian cruiser, the Shropshire, pulled into our anchorage just off Guadalcanal. Lights flashed back and forth between the Montpelier and the Shropshire. My admiral sent for me, and he said, that Australian admiral has a package for me. So I went to the quarterdeck of the Montpelier, got a motor whaleboat, made my way to the Shropshire, boarded her. There several courteous Australian officers took me immediately to their wardroom, and I had several very fast and very welcome scotch and sodas. Well, they dragged me back to the quarterdeck. There was my admiral's package. I opened it and looked at it. It had 12 bottles of the very finest English gin. Well, this is the vessel I used for that transit. Double-ended motor whaleboat, lap strike hull, very seaworthy. Still in use today. Mine didn't have that canopy. It has a crew of 3, the bow hook, the engineer, and the coxswain. The Admiral's package was carried down, placed in this motor whaleboat I got in, and we made our way back to Montpelier. Package was carried up the quarterdeck of the Montpelier, and a bottle and a half of that fine English gin was missing. And I had liquor on my breath. About the same time, Admiral Merrill had set in motion for the establishment of the first all-hands Iron Bottom Bay Club. I was the original treasurer of that outfit. In late 1944, I was transferred to the US Marine Corps. My unit was Landing Force Air Support Control Unit, and we were headed for Iwo Jima. After a short training period, we boarded our troop ship, the USS Napa. I had no idea of the seriousness of the operation we were headed into, but I did know that we would soon be on field rations and that field rations held no ketchup. And I've always loved ketchup. So I mentioned this to the ship supply officer, and he gave me 6 one-gallon cans of Heinz ketchup. Cardboard carton. The doggone thing weighed about 60 pounds.